we have different kind of greenhouses where we grow the strawberries, and also different types of trays and things like that. Also, the length of the cultivation can be quite different. So there is some variation in how we cultivate the strawberries in this system. And yeah, in all of these variants of strawberry cultivation, there might be some opportunities to steer how we can reuse the growing media, and how we can steer maybe the quality of the spent growing media. So today, what are the variables in this presentation? Well, we will mainly focus on strawberry, but we will also look at other crops. And then the focus is, of course, on the substrate. And nowadays, we mainly work with peat-based growing media, which are also tested in trials on reuse. But we are also in a transition towards peat-reduced organic growing media and peat-free organic growing media. So this topic is also important to be discussed today. Of course, we have the plants which grow on the growing medium, and in the case of strawberries, these are left at the end of cultivation. So this amount of biomass, it's really important for strawberry, but maybe for other crops it can be completely different. What is the biomass we have there? We will talk about the roots. We have some crops with younger roots, we have crops with older roots, and very important is, of course, the volume of substrate you have per plant. If you have only a very small volume of substrate with big plants, it can really give a completely different dynamics than when you have very small plants and a very huge amount of growing medium. And then the pre-treatment of the spent horticultural substrate, it can be any measure to sanitize it or other treatments. And well, this is the context of today. I already mentioned that the transition we are in from peat-based to peat-reduced or peat-free growing media. But we are also in another transition. Yeah, we are moving towards a circular economy. And maybe we can also say that we are moving towards circular horticulture. And this graph explains in a very simple way what is actually the basics of this transition. It means when we go to circular horticulture that all the resources we use, like water and also the growing medium, but maybe also the fertilizers we use, we try to completely reuse it so that in the end there is no waste anymore. While in a linear system, yeah, you have a cultivation, you start with fresh materials, fresh water, fresh fertilizers. But at the end of the cultivation, you say, okay, this is waste. So we throw away the water, the nutrients, and also the spent growing media. But before we start to talk about reusing growing media, what happens if we do not reuse growing media, organic horticultural substrates? Well, we can use them for composting, for instance, but we can also directly add them to the soil as a soil improver. And well, if we compare the spent horticultural substrates, organic substrates, with green composts, we see some clear differences in the characteristics. For instance, we see that spent growing media, they are very stable from a biological point of view, so the decomposition activity is really low. We also see that the microbial biomass is lower than in green compost, but it does not mean that spent growing media, they are actually dead. That's not the case. We also see that the spent growing media, they have a big advantage because they contain a lot of organic matter or carbon compared to green composts. And also the ratio with phosphorus and nitrogen, we have higher ratios. So it means actually that per unit of carbon that we apply to the soil, that we deliver less phosphorus and nitrogen, which can be really an advantage of this material. So then when we looked at the nitrogen, we see that the mineral nitrogen content of spent growing media and green composts are quite comparable, while we see that the nitrogen release, so the nitrogen mineralization from spent growing media, it's way lower than for green composts. And then for total nutrient contents, we also see that spent growing media, they are less rich in nutrients than green composts. while for both materials, the phosphorus and the potassium, which is included in these materials, is still plant available, so can still be taken up by the next crop. So this is about the comparison between really spent horticultural substrates and green composts. Of course, when we compare the substrates with the strawberry leaves, which are also still there at the end of cultivation, we clearly see that these strawberry leaves, the remaining plant biomass, it has a low biological stability, so there is a high decomposition ongoing still. It has also a way higher nutrient content on when you look at for instance, dry matter bases. We also see that it's way richer in phosphorus and nitrogen compared to the carbon content. So this brings us to the conclusion. If we really want to use spent growing media as a soil improver, which delivers a lot of carbon and to the soil, it's maybe better to only apply the spent growing media and to exclude the remaining plants from the strawberries, because they are quite rich in nutrients. However, you can still do it. In that case, actually, you just apply it on the parcels to get rid of this material. While if you really have a focused application of spent growing media without the leaves, you really have a very carbon-rich material that you apply to the soil. So that might be an example of going towards this circular horticulture scenario. But when you have a new horticultural substrate and you use it for cultivation, we might expect that the quality is lost during this cultivation. And that can be in terms of physical, biological, or chemical properties. However, we have seen that the physical properties, they remain quite high, and in some cases, they even improve because of the root formation. So it's not that in terms of physical properties that we destroy the growing media by using it once for cultivation. And also most of the material remains when you work with stable materials. In terms of biological properties, we also saw that there is actually an increase in biological stability during cultivation, so you get more stable materials at the end compared to the beginning. We also see a lower risk of nitrogen immobilization, so nitrogen which disappears. So we can conclude that the spent organic growing media, they are not dead. There is some microbial activity ongoing. While we can also see that we have more balanced microbial processes, and it's more predictable and more reliable than it is sometimes in new renewable growing media blends. And then in terms of chemical properties, well, the nutrients and the salts, they are the more challenging part of this reuse or this first use of a growing medium, and then afterwards during reuse, and it will be further focused on in this presentation.